Right, ready to dive deep. Today we're going to be looking at something pretty fundamental to how we learn. I bet this is going to get the philosopher in you thinking.
Yeah, we're really going deep with this one. The chapter we're looking at in this book, it really pushes some boundaries, like how we acquire knowledge. That's some serious philosophy right there, but we're going to keep it fun, I promise.
Right. We all know that seeing is believing right. But what if it's more than that? What if observing is learning,
Hmm.
like way beyond just copying what you see?
Exactly, and that's what this source is all about. It's saying, hey, modeling, it's not just imitation. There's so much more to it. Think of like a really skilled, what's a good example? A glass blower or a potter, yeah. They're not just mimicking movements. They're observing, picking up the principles, the rules, and then they use those rules to do something totally new.
So for our philosopher friends listening, it's not just about copying actions. It's absorbing the principles behind them and then using those to make something new.
Yeah, precisely. This source, it even jumps into this classic debate in philosophy. Identification versus imitation. Basically, it's saying we get hung up on these strict labels when really these processes, they're all mixed up together.
So we're not just sitting there soaking it all in. We're actually engaged in this active process, observing, interpreting, and then doing something with it.
Absolutely. This book breaks it down into 4 parts. Attention, retention, production, and then motivation.
Yes.
These are like the pillars of observational learning.
Yeah.
Knock one out and the whole thing falls apart.
So let's break down those pillars, starting with attention. Seems obvious, right?
Mhm.
Got to pay attention to learn. But I'm guessing there's more to it.
Oh yeah, there's way more to it. It's not just seeing, it's about really perceiving, blocking out the noise and zeroing in on what's important. And get this, what we focus on. Totally influenced by all kinds of things, like how noticeable something is, how complex it is, even how attractive the person doing it is.
Oh, so like a really charismatic professor, that makes a huge difference, right? I can think of a few lectures where I was just glued to my seat, totally captivated.
Oh, for sure. And there's research showing that even little kids, they learn better when they're watching someone who's like really animated, really expressive. Like we're wired to pay more attention to that kind of thing.
That's so interesting how much learning happens when there's so little, even before they, really understand language.
It really shows you how powerful observation is at that age. But it's not just about what's going on outside, right? What we already know also plays a huge role in what we pay attention to. Like a musician who's been playing for years, they'll pick up on stuff in a performance that someone who's never played would totally miss.
So it's like what we already know is the lens we use to see the world. It shapes what we notice, how we understand it, right?
Exactly. And that brings us to something really important, especially for, a philosopher. Your preconceptions, your biases, they all impact how you see and understand things. It's like a call to always, question yourself, your assumptions.
Whoa, that is deep. Okay, so we've paid attention, we've taken in the information, but how do we hold on to it? I think that's retention, the second pillar.
Yeah, that's retention. And this is where things get really interesting, especially for someone interested in, the nature of knowledge and all that. How do we encode the stuff we learn? Memory, mental representation, what are those all about? We're talking about the basic building blocks of understanding.
So how do we make those memories mean something? Like, how do we go from just seeing something to really getting it, so we can use it later?
Well, this source, it talks about this thing called symbolic representation. It's basically like we're taking those experiences we've observed and we're turning them into like mental pictures or summaries and words or even abstract rules. It's kind of like we're making our own little mental shorthand.
So it's not like our brains are just recording a perfect video replay of everything that happens.
You got
There's like a translation process going on.
You got it. And that translation process, that's a big question in cognitive science right now. There's this whole debate about mental imagery. Like, is it literally a picture in your head or is it more abstract, more conceptual? We could do a whole deep dive on that one.
I love it when things get like meta like that.
Yeah.
But let's stick with retention for now. Is there any way to like show this in everyday life, how this works?
Definitely. Think about like the idea of a house. You've seen tons of houses in your life, right? Different styles, sizes, colors, the whole 9 yards. But I bet you've never seen a house that perfectly matches the house you picture in your head.
That's true.
Yeah, and that's because your brain, it's created this like prototype based on seeing so many different kinds of houses. It's like, prototype abstraction.
That's a really good way to put it. And, as a philosopher, it makes me wonder, like, how much of my understanding of all these abstract concepts is it based on specific examples or more on this kind of generalized prototype? Wow, this is really making me think.
See, that's what we're going for. This isn't just about learning facts, it's about having those aha moments and really thinking about your own thinking.
Yeah, definitely getting my philosophical gears turning.
Oh.
Okay, but we got to keep moving. We've paid attention. We've held on to the information. Now it's time to, actually do something with it. So that's production, right? The third pillar.
Right on. This is where the rubber meets the road. We take that mental blueprint we've built from observing, and then we try to actually make it happen. Not always easy though, right?
Yeah, I've definitely seen a lot of stuff that I would never even try to do.
Yeah.
But seriously, like, what are some of the challenges we run into with this?
Well, the source talks about how sometimes our initial idea, it might be incomplete, like we're missing some pieces of the puzzle, or maybe we just don't have the physical skills, the dexterity to pull it off. And then there's the whole thing about monitoring your own actions, especially if they're super complicated and require a lot of coordination.
So it's like having this brilliant idea for a philosophy paper, but then you realize, like, wait, I don't actually know how to write that well.
Perfect analogy. Imagine trying to learn a musical instrument, right? You see how it's done, you have this image in your head of what it should sound like, but actually coordinating your fingers, reading the music, hitting the right notes, that
Yeah.
takes a lot of practice and feedback.
And probably some frustration along the way. You mentioned feedback, though. How does that play into this production stage?
Feedback is huge. It's like the bridge between what's in your head and what you're actually doing. It can be internal feedback, like noticing your own mistakes and adjusting, or external feedback, like from a teacher, a mentor, or just by seeing the results of your actions.
So, like when you're having a philosophical debate with someone,
Yeah.
their responses, their counterarguments, they help you refine your own thinking.
Absolutely. That back and forth is super important for growing and developing. Okay, are you ready to tackle the final pillar? Motivation.
Hit me with it. I have a feeling this one's going to be especially relevant for our philosopher listening in.
You're telling me we don't just copy everything we see, right? So what's the push? What motivates us to take what we know and actually do something with it? Why do we act on some observations and not others?
That's a really good question. I mean, think about it. I've seen plenty of things that I would never want to do myself.
Mm-hmm.
So what does the source say about what gets us going? What motivates us?
Okay, so it digs into these different kinds of incentives that come into play. There's external rewards, right? Things like praise, recognition, maybe you get something tangible out of it. But then there's the internal stuff too, like that feeling of mastery, the satisfaction of actually achieving a goal, or even just that sense of like, hey, I can do this. That's self-efficacy.
Yeah, I think that internal drive can be really powerful. But I'm curious about this generalized imitation thing. Is that related to motivation at all?
It is. This whole debate about generalized imitation, it's asking, like, do we just copy because similarity is in itself rewarding? Or is there something more to it? This source, it leans towards something more. Like, we're driven by what we expect to happen. We've learned that certain behaviors tend to lead to certain results, so we act accordingly.
So it's less about blind copying and more about like strategically using what we've observed
Hmm.
based on our understanding of, cause and effect.
Exactly. We're always making predictions based on what we've seen, what we've experienced, and those predictions, they shape the choices we make. Oh, and here's something that might surprise you. Sometimes seeing someone get punished for doing something, it actually makes us more likely to learn that behavior.
Wait, really? That seems kind of backwards. Why would we learn something that gets someone in trouble?
It all boils down to attention and memory. Seeing someone get punished, it grabs our attention, right? And it helps us remember what they did, even if it makes us not want to do it ourselves. It's like a cautionary tale. We learn from other people's mistakes, even if we don't mean to.
Wow, that's a great example of how, like, all these pieces, attention, retention, motivation, they're all connected, right? It's not just about the good stuff. It's about understanding the whole picture.
Totally. Observational learning, it's way more complex than just monkey see, monkey do. But to make things even more interesting, let's think about how all this plays out over our entire lives. The developmental journey.
Ah, the developmental journey. I'm guessing observational learning looks pretty different in like babies versus grown-ups, right?
Yeah.
What's What's the source have to say about that?
It totally does, yeah. It actually pushes back against this whole idea of like babies just being these passive little sponges soaking stuff up. Because even newborns, they can do some basic modeling, especially with stuff that's familiar to them or, things that have social meaning.
Wow, so even those tiny humans are learning by watching. That's wild.
Oh, absolutely. It all starts with those little back and forth interactions between babies and their caregivers,
Hmm.
like that reciprocal imitation thing. They're connecting, learning to take turns and building up their little library of actions all through observation.
Those early moments are so, so important, huh? They're like the foundation for all the learning that happens later on.
They really are. And as kids get older, as their brains develop, their ability to learn through observation, it gets even more sophisticated. They get better at using symbols, thinking abstractly, even seeking out information on purpose. They become like these little expert observers.
So it's like modeling itself actually helps their brains grow. It's a feedback loop.
Exactly. It's all connected,
Yeah.
Our natural abilities, our experiences, the people around us, they all interact in this crazy dance of development. And as we grow up, we move past just copying specific examples. We start to figure out the general rules and principles behind things.
That's uh that's what they call abstract modeling, right?
Mhm.
Tell me more about that. It sounds uh pretty deep, especially for a philosopher.
It's basically the ability to go beyond what you've actually seen with your own eyes and do something new based on this underlying rules.
Mhm.
Like language is a good example. We learn grammar by seeing a bunch of different sentences that have a similar structure, right? And then that lets us create totally new sentences that no one's ever said before.
Whoa, that's pretty mind-blowing. It's like we're always building on what we've observed, taking all these experiences and making something new and unique out of them.
It really speaks to the incredible power of the human mind, doesn't it? And this abstract modeling. It's not just for language. We use it in social situations when we're trying to solve problems, even when we're thinking about, complex philosophical ideas.
Yeah, it really makes you think, doesn't it? Like how much of what we consider original thought, how much of it actually comes from the patterns and rules we've picked up through observation. Maybe even our philosophical ideas are more influenced by this than we realize.
It's a humbling thought for sure, and it really highlights how important it is to pay attention to the models we're exposed to, especially when it comes to something um, like how we understand gender roles.
Oh, that's a good point. Observational learning, it can have a huge impact on how we see the world and our place in it, especially with those kind of social constructs, like gender. What's the source say about that?
Well, it's complicated. It's not just about our parents telling us how boys should act and how girls should act. It's about seeing how people around us behave, the stuff we see in the media, the stories and ideas our culture tells us. All those things, they shape our understanding of like what masculine and feminine mean.
It's like we're swimming in this sea of gendered messages,
Yeah.
and it's hard not to, let those messages affect how we see ourselves and other people.
Exactly. And this ties back to philosophy too, because this whole idea of social cognitive theory, it challenges that view that says gender-typed behavior is all about biology or how we label ourselves. It says that social learning, the stuff we pick up from watching others, it has a huge impact on how we understand and how we express our gender roles.
So we're not just passively accepting these cultural norms. We're actively thinking about things, making choices, shaping our own development, even within all these societal expectations.
Right. We have more power to choose than we might think. But before we wrap things up, I'm kind of curious, is this just a human thing? Like, do other animals learn through observation?
That's a great question. It takes us beyond just thinking about humans and into the whole world of like animal cognition.
Yeah.
Does the source talk about that at all?
It does. It says that some animals can learn simple actions by watching others, but primates, they seem to be better at it. They can do this delayed modeling thing and maybe even some symbolic representation.
So we're not the only ones who learn by watching, huh?
Not at all. In fact, there's this really cool example in the source about chimpanzees that were raised by human families. They saw their human caregivers using tools, putting on makeup, all sorts of complicated things, and they started doing those things too just from observing.
That's amazing. It really shows how powerful modeling can be, even across different species. We could talk about this forever, but I think it's time to start bringing this deep dive to a close. What are some of the big takeaways we want our listener to walk away with?
I think the most important one is that observational learning, it's not just this passive thing like mimicry. It's a core part of who we are, how we learn, how we make sense of everything around us. From the simplest actions to the most complex philosophical ideas, Observation shapes how we understand things.
We've seen how attention, retention, production, and motivation, they all work together to make learning possible, and how those processes change as we grow up.
And we even touched on some of the bigger implications of observational learning, like how it shapes gender roles and the responsibility we have as models for other people.
Yeah, it's a powerful reminder that we're all constantly influencing each other, even if we don't realize it. Our actions, our words, even just being around other people, all of that can act as a model for them.
So as you go about your day, think about the models you're choosing, the messages you're taking in, and the behaviors you're encouraging on others. We're all part of this giant web of influence, shaping the future through our actions and interactions.
That's an awesome thought to leave our listeners with. So, on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive into the fascinating world of observational learning. Hopefully, it's given you some new insights and maybe even inspired you to see the world in a whole new way.
Thanks for joining us. Until next time, keep observing, keep learning, and keep questioning everything.